This is Host Jockeys Unite, the only episodic podcast that strives to not only educate and entertain those in emergency services, but to give an inside peek inside the fire and EMS services to the general public. We are here to leave a legacy for future generations. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Edwards and Jay Gallagher. Hello and welcome back to Host Jockeys Unite. I'm your host, Chris Edwards, and this is my co-host, Jay Gallagher.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be back. We're finally back on the air. Big shout out to, before we get started, to Charleston Fire Department C Shift, Chuck, you and the guys. I hope you really enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening. And my co-host, Chris, welcome back to North Carolina, my friend. You've had some pretty cool and exciting stuff going on. You want to tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. Well, over the past month or so, I've been involved in a out-of-state move and moved back to North Carolina. Picked up a new job as a full-time EMT, and between that, my orientation, and just the move in general, life's been hectic, so I haven't had time to record any episodes. So now we're finally back on track and going to get these episodes on a more regular basis. Also,
welcome home, brother.
Thank you. And also be aware that we're in the process of formulating a new show that's at the end of every month, our live show. There'll be more information about that forthcoming. And in today's episode, we'll discuss the Charleston Superstore fire, a historic event that claimed the lives of 9 of the finest firefighters in the country, the Charleston 9. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'm Chris Edwards, and I'm the host of the podcast, and I'm going to give you a little information about myself and Jay Gallagher. I began my fire career about 6 years ago as a volunteer firefighter and took all my certifications that were required, all my classes. I then moved into a career firefighter position about 6 months ago to a year ago, where I obtained my EMT certification. Jay, when did you begin your fire service?
Counting my Explorer time, it started in 1986, and I retired in 2015, so that's 29 years. I've had a long and rewarding career.
And what positions have you held throughout your career in the fire service, and explain these positions?
I did everything from basic grunt firefighter, for the driver operator, lieutenant, captain. The only positions I have not held is any assistant chief or chief's positions, with the exception of I was chief for about a year and a half of a kind of a CERT based emergency response group.
Yeah, you're talking about REACT. That's where we actually met each other.
Exactly, and it's hard to believe it's been this long.
Been at least 10 years, yeah.
Yep.
And so you retired as a captain from the fire service.
That is correct. Alrighty, everybody. This is the part of the show where we call Ask the Firefighter. This is where you get to send in your questions, concerns, whatever, and we try to, best of our ability, answer them here on the show. Today's question comes from a Facebook fan. Her name is Crystal Lynn Jones, and her question was, how did you get over the fear of fire? Most people run from it, not to it. I see a lot of people try, but not all succeed. Crystal, we're going to answer your question right now. Chris, take it away.
So, Crystal, as firefighters, we are taught to always fall back on our training. It will save your life. Firemen are taught not to fear fire, but to always maintain a healthy respect for it. We keep a mindset of not to focus on what could potentially happen to you in a fire, but to always keep it on the back burner, and to remember that fire is very unpredictable and a powerful force of nature. Understanding fire science and fire behavior can do a lot to put your fears to rest. As you stated earlier, some people succeed in this mental game, and others just don't have what it takes to be a firefighter. I can honestly say that most every firefighter is in a small way a pyromaniac. Fire just captivates us. To me, fire is in a controlled environment such as a campfire is an utterly fascinating and beautiful phenomenon. Jay, how about you?
Well, with me, I've had a fear, but the fear come after the fact. When we roll up on the scene and smoke's pushing, flames blowing out the window, I guess it's my adrenaline that keeps me from being scared, and I go do what needs to be done, and then after we pull back and I turn and look at what I just went through and see the condition of the structure or whatnot, that's when it's like, holy cow, I just went into that. And that's when it usually, gets me is after the fact. I've always had a respect for fire, ever since I got burnt when I was younger. That really kind of kicked my respect for it into high gear. But like you said, there's a little bit of a pyromaniac in all of us. Like when we cook on the charcoal grill, when the charcoals are burning, I'll shoot a little bit more, fluid on there just to watch the fire, But don't Crystal, don't get us wrong. We're not downing the people who can't, don't have what it takes to be an interior firefighter. There's no shame in that whatsoever. There's plenty of other things they could do on a fire scene, like pump the truck, run tools, even fight fire from the outside. But there's absolutely, positively no shame in not being able to go in.
Right, and I can agree with you on that too. It's not that I'm not scared. Sometimes it's scary, like you said, especially after the fact, when you sit back and you look and you say, "Wow, I mean that's crazy. That was pretty crazy what I just did." So if you have any questions about the fire or EMS service that you would like answered on the show, or you would like to learn more about how to become a fire volunteer or paid, please email us at firefighter274@outlook.com.
Dispatcher Engine 11, Engine 10, Ladder 5, Battalion 4, good here for possible structure. Dispatcher Engine 11, Engine 10, Ladder 5, Battalion 4, started route to 1807 Savannah Highway behind a Superstore, Super Sofa Store, possible 7-6, 1909 out.
On Monday, June 18, 2007, the Charleston Fire Department responded to a standard structure fire, a call that firefighters all too often take for granted as run-of-the-mill. This incident quickly evolved into one of the most famous and tragic fire scenes in fire history. We're going to cover what went wrong on this call, as chronicled in the NIOSH report that caused it to spiral out of control and ultimately claimed the lives of 9 of our finest brothers, the Charleston 9. Here's a quick timeline.
Charleston Fire, how can I help you?
Yes, sir. I'm at Superstore on Highway 17. It's a huge fire.
7:05 on that fateful evening. Callers flood dispatchers reporting the fire.
I need more pressure. I'm giving you everything I got.
30 minutes later, things get complicated. A worker calls from inside the building.
You inside?
Give me help.
You inside? Whereabouts?
At the back.
Oh, at the back.
Be advised, we're getting a 911 call stating that there is a person trapped in the building, at the back of the building,
And then there's a heartbreaking moment.
Excuse me, I got a wife and kid.
I know you pointed, just hang in there, just stay low for me. You get low on the ground. Once they get in there, you holler as loud as you can.
The man trapped inside, hammering the walls, doing anything to get out. It's 8:10. The mayor checks in and gets bad news.
This is Riley speaking. What's the latest on the fire?
It's still going. It's the top of the. From what I'm understanding, Mayor Raleigh, is the roof is caved in the middle.
The struggle still ongoing as the men continue to pour water on the flames.
I've got him 300 pounds. I can't give him any more. My hoses are going
It's 8:15, some of them facing dangerous conditions inside the building. It's almost 10 o'clock. By then, Chief Rusty Thomas is wanting phone numbers for some of the families of the fallen firefighters.
If you are new to the fire service, you may not know about this tragedy. The line of duty death of these firefighters came from a pyramid of things gone wrong, and a department deep within tradition that didn't change with the times. First new engine, engine 10, didn't have any fire visible, just light smoke in the showroom of the Superstore. The fire that at the time was still hidden in the void area in the ceiling, which was constructed with steel truss system. We all know that steel will lose its integrity at 600 degrees and loses 50% of its strength at 1100 degrees and totally melts at 2700 degrees. The building was not sprinkled, which allowed for even faster fire growth. The fire started in a pile of trash on the loading dock, which was wood construction at the rear of the structure, burning through the wall into what was used as a holding area. The fire then got into the void space and filled the void area with heavy smoke. The fire then made its way to the rear of the showroom, which was full of furniture. As the fire burned, it filled the showroom from floor to ceiling with heavy black smoke. As the fire progressed, it slowed and almost went out due to being underventilated. At this time, the incident commander ordered the breaking of the front windows of the showroom, which gave the fire the oxygen that it was craving. The fire makes a run to the front of the building, causing a flashover, which blew some firefighters out of the already broken front windows, and thus cutting off any escape route for any firefighter still inside. Water supply was hampered by the supply lines, which were 2.5-inch lines being laid across the busy road with traffic running over them. At this time, the steel roof trusses fail and partial collapse occurs. In less than 30 minutes, 9 firefighters are dead. Jay?
International Association of Firefighters did a in-depth investigation of this call, along with NIST and OSHA and any other acronym that you want to throw in there. And this is some of the things that they found. The main showroom was built in the late 1950s. It was 120 by 140, giving approximately 17,000 square foot of display area. The West showroom was constructed in 1994, which was 60 by 120 for 7,000 more square foot of display area. And then the East showroom was built in 1995, which was basically a twin of the West showroom at 60 by 120 for 7,000 more square foot of display area. Now, in 1996, 120 by 130 warehouse was built to the rear of the structure. The total combined square foot of the structure was over 50,000 square foot. Now, the timeline of events for this incident was taken from the NIOSH report. At 1856, fire was observed at the rear of the store. The store employee was unable to control the fire with a portable fire extinguisher and reported the fire to 911 center. At 1908 hours, dispatch received a report of a fire behind the store. At 1909 hours, engines 10 and 11, truck 5, and battalion chief were dispatched. 1912 hours, engines 10, 11, truck 5, assistant chief, and battalion chief all arrive on the scene. At 1913, assistant chief is inside the structure, opens the metal doors, and finds fire on the loading dock, which was at the time fully involved. Now, to kind of back the ice cream truck up a little bit, the conditions inside the showroom were tenable enough to where this particular assistant chief was able to make 3 or 4 trips from the front to the back to the front, back to the back. So at the time, he thought that the showroom was safe. Now, when he opens these doors, the suction from the fire warning, that gulp of air, literally pulled the doors from his hands and causing the fire to spread to the holding area of the warehouse. Now, at 1916 hours, the chief of department arrives on the scene and assumes command. At 1920, Engine 10 was at the loading dock, receives water from Engine 12 via 2.5 supply line, 850-foot hose stretch. At 1927 hours, Engine 11 at the storefront receives water from Engine 16. Engine 16 is parked 1,800 feet away.
That's a good long haul.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's a lot of hose to pick up. During this time, a trapped employee calls 911, and a lost and trapped firefighter gives mayday. At 1931 hours, the employee is rescued, and another mayday is transmitted. Chief orders the evacuation of the fire building, and the evacuation horns on the engines are sounded. At 1935, Chief orders the venting of the front store windows. Brown smoke pours from the broken windows. At 1936, black smoke rolls from the front windows. And anyone who's had any kind of experience, we all know what comes next. 1937 hours, major flashover and fire rolls out from the front windows. 1951 hours, main showroom partially collapses, and at 2000 hours, the fire is finally deemed under control. Now, the initial conditions were large amounts of foam-filled furniture filled the showrooms, giving it a heavy fire load. 480 gigajoules in the main showroom. Now, if you don't know what a gigajoule is, and I just learned this while doing the research on it. An example is 100 gallons of gasoline is equal to 12 gigajoules of energy. So
it's another measurement of heat, like a BTU.
Yeah. That's a good way to explain it. Let's see, in the loading dock area, it was 130 gigajoules. And in the main warehouse, it was 840 gigajoules. So therefore, the showroom had the equivalent of 4,000 gallons of gasoline worth of energy. The warehouse, 8,000 gallons of gas worth of energy. There was no compartmentalization in the showroom, so the fire burned freely and easily throughout. And again, the building was not sprinklered. Once the fire made the main showroom, it was tenable for less than 15 minutes. If you're new to the fire service or a buff and don't know what tenable means, basically, in layman's terms, is how long you can stay in there and do your job before you got to get out. Now, 2007 Charleston Fire Department had 237 firefighters and 19 companies throughout the city with a population of over 100,000. In 2006, the assistant chief had done a pre-incident survey but failed to detect the fire hazards that were present. And again, insufficient water supply for a major fire. They only had 2.5-inch hose for their supply lines.
Right.
Instead
of 5.
Exactly. And 5-inch was available then. All the trucks on my department had 5-inch at that time. The supply lines were laid across the road with traffic flowing across both lanes of traffic and crossing over the lines and impeding the water supply further with no traffic control. Their air bottles only lasted 18 minutes. Now, I know that we've got to factor in the time of, getting to the seat of the fire, remembering how long it took us to get to the seat of the fire, so we have enough air to get out. And whatever's left is our working time. But these bottles only lasted the guys 18 minutes from giddy up to whoa. There were firefighters heard over the radio praying. And 24 minutes into the incident, the assistant incident commander didn't know who was inside giving the Mayday call nor did he know where his companies were at and what they were doing, with no accountability. This building had several several code violations. Period. Additions were built with no permits, and numerous more code violations that were found after fact. The building was constructed with wood and sheet metal and had open floor plans. At this time, sprinklers were required in the building, but there were none there. Exits were not properly maintained, and that, lack of due to code enforcement. One of the articles that I read said that some of the exit doors were padlocked from the outside. And let's see. At the time of the fire, there was no safety officer, nor was there a fire marshal's office there for any kind of code enforcement. Now, the fire department's role in the incident is the fact that there was no regular fire inspections to this building. The firefighters were not trained to spot code violations when they went for their pre-incident survey trips. They were understaffed. Like I said, 237 firefighters, 19 companies for 100,000 plus people. The fire department had outdated turnout gear, which had melted during the fire, undersized attack lines and supply lines for that volume of fire. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of the saying. My dad preached it throughout his firefighting career. Big fire, big water, little fire, little water. No proper scene size up. The crews were not pulled out soon enough. And the initial thoughts were the firefighters died due to crushing injuries from the partial collapse. But the coroner's report showed that no crushing injuries were found, and the firefighters died of smoke inhalation and thermal burns. The Sofa Superstore settled civil claims of up to $18 million. When Chris and I started putting this show together, we definitely discussed that we don't want to point blame to anybody. And in this part of the show, it's going to sound like that we're trying to rip open old wounds and pour salt in them, which it is not. We look for the good things that come out of this incident. And in as typical fire service, it sometimes takes a tragedy for good things to come out of it. And what we found in our research come out of the post-incident. Again, we're not pointing blame. We don't want to rip open any wounds. We deeply admire and respect the 9 that died. So please do not take it as we're trying to shame the fire department in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So the significant changes in the Charleston Fire Department post-Sofa Superstore fire. Chris, take it away.
Okay, so the Charleston Fire Department officials told reporters significant improvements have been made since the deadly fire claimed 9 city firefighters almost a decade ago. The Charleston Fire Department took a lot of criticism after the incident at the Sofa Superstore with demands for changes in the way the department operates. High-ranking members of the department said automatic aid agreements with several fire departments and better firefighter training are among the changes they say they have helped save lives. The aid agreements designed to create quicker response to a fire. Fire Chief Rusty Thomas retired shortly after the fire's first anniversary and was replaced by Tom Carr, a respected chief from Maryland. Chief Carr oversaw top-to-bottom overhaul of the fire department that changed nearly every facet of its operations. The city spent more than $8 million in upgrading the department equipment and so forth. NIOSH investigators concluded that to maximize the risk of similar occurrences, the fire department should develop, implement, and enforce written and standard SOPs, or standard operating procedures, for occupational safety and health program in accordance with NFPA 1500. They should develop and implement and enforce a written incident management system to be followed by at all emergency incident operations. They should develop, implement, and enforce written SOPs that identify incident management training standards and requirements for members expected to serve in command roles. Ensure that the incident commander is clearly identified as the only individual with the overall authority and responsibility for management of all activities at an incident. They should ensure that the incident commander conducts an initial scene size up and risk assessment of the incident before beginning interior firefighting operations. They should train firefighters to communicate interior conditions to the incident commander as soon as possible to provide regular updates. They should ensure that the incident commander establishes a stationary command post, maintains the role of director of fireground operations, and does not become involved in firefighting efforts. They should ensure that the early implementation of a division/group command into the incident command system. They should ensure that the incident command system they should ensure that the incident commander continuously evaluates the risk versus gain when determining whether the fire suppression operation will be offensive or defensive. They should ensure that the incident commander maintains close accountability for all personnel operating on the fireground. They should ensure that a separate incident safety officer, independent from the incident commander, is appointed at each structure fire. They should ensure that crew integrity is maintained during fire suppression operations. They should ensure that a rapid intervention crew, or RIC, or rapid intervention team, is established and available to immediately respond to emergency rescue incidents. They should ensure that adequate numbers of staff are available to immediately respond to emergency incidents. They should ensure that ventilation to release heat and smoke is closely coordinated with interior fire suppression operations. They should conduct pre-incident planning inspections of buildings within their jurisdiction to facilitate development of safe fireground strategies and tactics. They should consider establishing and enforcing standardized resource deployment approaches and utilize dispatch entities to move resources to fill service gaps. They should develop and coordinate pre-incident planning protocols with mutual aid departments. They should also ensure that any offensive attack is conducted using adequate fire streams based on the characteristics of the structure and fuel load present. They should ensure that an adequate water supply is established and maintained. They should consider using exit locators such as high-intensity floodlights or flashing strobe lights to guide lost or disoriented firefighters to the exit. They should ensure that Mayday transmissions are received and prioritized by the incident commander, aka clear the airwaves. They should train firefighters on actions to take if they become trapped or disoriented inside a burning structure. They should ensure that all firefighters and line officers receive fundamental and an annual refresher training according to the NFPA 1001 and NFPA 1021. They should implement joint training on response protocols with mutual aid departments. They should ensure apparatus operators are properly trained and familiar with their apparatus. They should protect stretch hose lines from vehicular traffic and work with law enforcement and other appropriate agencies to provide traffic control. They should ensure that firefighters wear a full array of turnout clothing and personal protective equipment appropriate for the assigned task while participating in fire suppression and overhaul activities. They should ensure that firefighters are trained in air management techniques to ensure that they receive the maximum benefit from their self-contained breathing apparatus. They should develop and implement and enforce written SOPs to ensure that SCBA cylinders are fully charged and ready for use. They should use thermal imaging cameras during initial size up and search phases of fire. They should develop, implement, and enforce written SOPs and provide firefighters with training on the hazards of truss construction. They should establish a system to facilitate the reporting of unsafe conditions or code violations to the appropriate authorities. They should ensure that firefighters and emergency responders are provided with effective incident rehabilitation. They should provide firefighters with station and work uniforms, example, pants and shirts that are compliant with NFPA 1975, and ensure the use and proper care of these garments. Additionally, federal and state occupational safety and health administrations should consider developing additional regulations to improve the safety of firefighters, including adopting National Fire Protection Association (NFPA) consensus standards. Additionally, federal and state occupational safety and health administrations should already read that, sorry. Additionally, manufacturers, equipment designers, and researchers should continue to develop and refine durable, easy-to-use radio systems to enhance verbal and radio communication in conjunction with properly worn SCBA. They should conduct research into refining existing and developing new technology to track the movement of firefighters inside of structures. Additionally, code-setting organizations and municipalities should require the use of sprinkler systems in commercial structures, especially ones having high fuel loads or other unique life safety hazards, and establish retroactive requirements for the installation of fire sprinkler systems when additions to commercial buildings increase the fire and safety life hazards. They should require the use of automatic ventilation systems in large commercial structures, especially ones having high fuel loads and other unique life safety hazards. Additionally, municipalities and local authorities having jurisdiction should coordinate the collection of building information and the sharing of information between authorities and fire departments. They should consider establishing one central dispatch center to coordinate and communicate activities involving units from multiple jurisdictions. They should ensure that fire departments responding to mutual aid incidents are equipped with mobile and portable communication equipment that are capable of handling the volume of radio traffic and allow jurisdiction among all responding companies within their jurisdiction. Following the department removed booster lines from pumpers and retrofitted and repiped that area for crosslays.
Okay, let's discuss a few points here.
Okay.
There's times where I put a star by it. It was talking about the hose lines and the the size matching the volume of fire, basically.
Right.
And they were talking about the hoses, 2.5-inch hose, being laid across the street to catch the hydrants there across the way.
Right.
Now, we looked it up earlier today, and in 2007, on Savannah Highway, where the Superstore was, the water mains were 8-inch. That's plenty of water going to the hydrant. And the use of a 2.5 in this situation is kind of like trying to stuff an elephant in a Volkswagen. You might eventually get it there, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to be a slow process. They did call for the pump station at the city water plant to boost the pressure going through the water mains, which is fine. But still, we're using 2.5, and that's cutting down on the size of your, or the volume of water rather than, and 5-inch hose was available then.
Yeah, it was.
Our trucks had it. Our neighboring departments had it. It kind of falls back to, where did the breakdown occur. Now, I know that they had said that Charleston Fire Department was a fire department deep in tradition,
Right.
which is fine. But we've discussed this in the previous podcast. There's a time and place for tradition, and there's a time and place to move with the times.
Right.
Where did the breakdown occur? It's, were they just not that wanting to change that bad that they just ignored everything coming up the pike? Was it a financial thing that the city wasn't giving them enough budget to do this?
I can't imagine that. I mean, Charleston's a very well-to-do town. Always has been.
Well, where did the problem lie?
Good question.
The city, like you said, we're talking about in 2007, population of 100,000 plus, and tax base. When you pay those of y'all that don't know, when you pay your taxes, there's a portion of your tax money that goes towards fire department. Now, that should have been plenty of money in the budget for the retrofit. Even if you did a truck every year,
right?
When the new budget comes through, buy your 5-inch hose for it. Borrow 5-inch hose if you have to, but get with the times.
Well, I had always heard people refer to back earlier in the earlier times. I'd heard people be like, "Well, this is a 2 booster fire, or this is a 3 booster fire, or this is a 1 booster fire." I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I've heard people using it in those terms.
And now, folks, we have some snippets from the radio communications that we took out, and they were running so low on water that they were calling the supply engines to boost their pressure. And it was replied, do you want the 2.5 supply line or do you want the 2.5 attack line? Well, for the first, I'm gonna guesstimate it and say the first 45 minutes to an hour, they were fighting the fire with 1.5-inch and booster lines.
Yeah.
They never pulled the 2.5 until later in the fire. The only 2.5 that was on the ground was the supply line. Chris, can you find that? Can you bring that clip up and play it for everybody?
The 2.5.
Yeah, where he's telling them to bring the 2.5 to the door and then charging the.
Hope this is the right one.
Fingers crossed, folks.
16 cars here. Keep yours to the rear of the building and make an entry. Negative, come to the front door and get me a 2.5 and bring the 2.5 in here.
Yep,
16 copy. What's your name, sir?
Okay. So there was the 2.5, the clip from the 2.5, and he did in fact call for the 2.5. I know you can't hear it on your end, Jay.
Yeah. And like I said, that was probably 45 minutes into the incident. I mean, why wait so long? I mean, a 2.5, really, in all honesty, should have been pulled as the initial attack line.
From the go, yeah.
I mean, like I said earlier in the show, I've been preached to ever since I first come into the fire service. Big fire, big water, little fire, little. Well, with the volume of fire that they had at the Superstore, that should have been, a no-brainer 2.5. Even though you didn't see anything in the showroom when you arrived, you had confirmation of a work fire in the back. But,
well,
why not? I guess it's like, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and it still be on the truck.
Right. And my opinion on that is that volume of fire should have never gotten that much fire. If in fact they got there, and as the report said, it was smothering because of under ventilation, it should have never have gotten that far to begin with.
No, the initial truck company, I believe it was Truck 5. Ventilation should have occurred somewhere.
Yeah,
and
but not that front window.
Yeah, exactly. We need vertical ventilation. Even if they'd had to do a trench cut all the way through that main showroom floor, just to stop the progress of the fire. Even though, yes, it was in the up in the trusses and everything, you still had little time to be able to do that. And just from what we heard on through the radio transmissions, there was time to ventilate.
And guys, we did listen to the whole hour, the whole first hour of radio traffic. It's just that I cut some of this out and picked the most important parts of it and brought it to the show.
And I'll give props to that dispatcher. I mean, I'll give him a big shout out, because unfortunately he seemed to be the only one who knew what was going on, and he was who knows how many miles away.
Exactly.
So
and you could tell that the IC was coming unhinged just by listening to it, because you could hear the tone rapidly in his voice changing from early on to middle to close to the end of it. To the end of it, he was almost like, I don't even know how to describe it. His voice was just giving it away.
Yeah, we can all sit here and armchair quarterback it till the cows come home. What we would have done or could have done better. But until we're put in the position that he was in, we don't have any right to say a word.
Exactly. I'm not saying I could do it any better, or you.
No, me neither. I mean, my son's a firefighter also. We were sitting here talking about it after you and I got off the computer last night, listening to all this, and we both come to the conclusion that we don't know how we would react. I mean, yes, we've all been on a call where civilians lost their life, but one of our own, not to count 9 of our own.
Oh, right.
At one time.
Right.
And my son kind of brought up a good question. He said, Dad, I said, how many times, I wondered, during this incident, did the chief stop and think to himself, what have I done?
Well, I would say if it were me, at that particular instance, I would have said none. But then later on, like as the days and months go by, I would be like thinking about that every day in those terms. But right then and there, I probably doubt he even stopped to think about what have I done, that during that whole incident.
Yeah. Now there was firefighters that had been interviewed, and they were it was put in various articles that the chief seemed to refuse to take overall command.
Yeah.
Of the scene,
which
to me tells me he was trying to implement the ICS system, where you delegate, and it just didn't work.
Well,
and
maybe, but from what I heard in the radio traffic, the whole first hour, like I said, we didn't hear any radio traffic past the first hour because that's all that was available. But the whole first hour, it was all him. His span of control, he was way out of his span of control for incident command system, for the NIM system. And this was 7 years after 9/11, and 9/11 is what gave birth to the incident command system because of communication failures. So this incident was 7 years after 9/11 happened, and yet he's not using the incident command system because he's got all these divisions that's got a single commander. He's not in his span of control.
Go ahead. Go ahead. And also, he needed to be stationary,
right?
And he was all over the place. I mean, one report said that he was back there when they rescued the civilian. He was back there in the back trying to help get him out.
Which is one of the changes they made. They've now got a command car, for lack of a better word, where the incident commander stays in his car, and the only information he gets is over the radio, so he can't see anything with his eyes, which will distract him or her.
Yeah, it prevents tunnel vision.
Yeah,
and he has to rely on good communication from his
teams.
From his teams, his interior vision commanders or whatnot, which is good. What was his name? He was Al Bruno, chief of Phoenix Fire Department. He never, when they would get a fire, he never went to the scene itself. He would stop his chief's vehicle a couple of 3 blocks away, to where he wouldn't even see the incident, and he would rely on information that was fed back to him from his battalion chiefs, captains, lieutenants, whatever, and it worked. And Al Bruno, he did a lot for the fire service, and in that retrospect, he'd done a lot for the fire service, period. But,
right.
But like I said, he never ever seen the actual fire scene. He would always stop, like I said, 2 or 3 blocks away and command it from there. And
right. Okay.
The system worked.
Right. And then that leads me to another point on communications. From what I heard, and you heard it too, in 2007, the digital trunking system may not have been around everywhere, but they have, and they were probably still on analog in 2007. However, you know that county had more than one channel to use for a tactical channel. So why were they not assigned, a channel for interior, a channel for dispatch, a channel for command? The radio traffic was everybody at one time walking all over top of everybody, and nobody could hear a thing. And I mean,
and
go ahead.
The chief never even heard the initial Mayday at first.
Right.
And
but there's
go ahead.
I say, but there's more than one channel on an analog system that could be utilized.
Really,
and separated.
Now we're. I just noticed we're kind of getting a little bit of tunnel vision here ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's look at this from another perspective. Okay, everyone gets there, and they start, doing their job. Things went south quick. We both know that.
Right.
And everybody, don't get me wrong, I wasn't there, so I can't say for certain, but let's just what if it for a minute. What if when they rolled up, they seen the light smoke, they seen the fire on the loading dock, thought this was going to be a, drop 2 lines and be home before dinner time, or before bedtime rather, type of deal. And then when everything went south so quick, they didn't have time or didn't stop to think to request a TAC channel or an ops channel. You see what I'm saying?
True.
So,
Which honestly goes back to um, implementing SOPs and protocols.
exactly. That's exactly where I was going with that.
I mean, now any structure fire, if it's a fully involved structure, at least both the departments I've been in, if it's a fully involved burning to the ground house or Grandma Jones burn popcorn in the microwave, they get a TAC channel, regardless
Yeah.
of what incident it is, of the severity of the incident, if it's classified as a structure fire.
Yeah, and on the departments that I've been on, we get a call for a structure fire. We automatically get 2 other departments coming to us.
Right.
Not even requesting,
Yeah.
with the automatic aid. At the time of this fire, they didn't have any kind of automatic aid agreements with any of the surrounding departments.
Right.
And, they get on scene and they, get into more than what they, like the fire we're talking about. They get on scene, wind up with more than they can handle, then they've got to wait. Call the dispatcher, tell them they need mutual aid from such and such department, wait for those guys to gear up, rig up, and get to the scene and go to work. And,
and that's another thing. The audio clips that we listened to, the IC was requesting resources one by one instead of
a full alarm assignment.
Send me all you got. He was like, oh, well, send me engine 3 or 13, engine 12. Now we need engine 15. No, where's EMS? I mean,
yeah.
Why wait?
Yeah.
I've always been taught that request resources early. Request everything you need. If you don't need it, you can always cancel it. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Exactly. And that's another thing. I know, folks, I know it sounds like we're jumping around, but, it's all this information is just, overwhelming and kind of falling into place as we're talking.
Yeah, it's kind of discombobulated.
Yeah, but on the audio that we listened to last night, the dispatcher was asked to send more ambulances. Instead of having the capability to push a button or type it into the computer and dispatch them from there, he had to make a phone call to the EMS station for them to dispatch EMS. Why?
Right.
Why not have everything right there at your disposal and be able to do it right there? I mean,
well, modern day dispatch centers have that. They click EMS and then on the computer click EMS and it's like, okay, they talk and then it goes straight to the EMS.
Man, well, back in 2007 they had that capability too, or at least my department did.
Right.
To where, Dare County, was set up to where, one dispatcher could take care of anything you needed, up to and including Coast Guard.
Yeah.
And and Dare County is a drop in the bucket compared to a city the size of Charleston, South Carolina.
Right.
And I guess it's like, I'm thinking, if we can have it, why couldn't they have had it?
Right. I guess it's all depend on, you got a lot of department leaders that just don't like to spend money.
True. But they it comes back and to bite them in the can, and unfortunately it bit them big time on this one.
So I'm going to go off the rails a little bit on this and ask you a question because you might know the answer to it because I don't. I'm a little confused about one thing.
Okay.
The audio sounds like it's analog, like an analog
Mhm.
system, but yet
Right.
there's an instance where they were talking about, pushing the emergency button. Did analog radios back in the day have emergency buttons too, or is that just a digital thing?
Um, I'm not sure. Um,
Because they had that wiseacre that called in and like, tell them to push the the orange button.
yeah, play. Did you get that clip?
I didn't. I wish I did.
Folks, they had I don't. He was bound to have been a first responder from somewhere to know about the emergency button on the radios. He calls dispatch and really kind of hateful about it in a way, and tells the dispatcher to get on the radio and tell the fireman that's down to push his emergency call button. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those were his words, almost verbatim. And, you know, I'm not sure if analog had it. I know before Dare County switched over to the trunk system, my radio that I carried with me did not. If one of us went down, we had to rely on the pass device.
Yeah.
But they could have. I don't know. We can do a little bit of research and find out and let everybody know on the next show.
So I do have the clip here where the fireman on ladder 5 presses the emergency button, and I can play it.
Go ahead and play that.
Call 1. The engineer on ladder 5's emergency button has been activated.
It's the engineer.
The engineer, yeah.
Call 1 is Mike French.
Mike French.
Yep. Now, and going by the rule book that I was taught by.
Okay, hang on.
Okay.
Lieutenant William Johnson. Call 1 to the station. I'm calling. Everybody say what's my name is. Everybody accounted for.
Is everybody accounted for? Okay, yeah. So I know you can't hear that, but it started out with the dispatcher asking or saying that ladder 5 engineer pushed his emergency button, and then there was a long pause, and then it asked the ICUs come back asking us everybody accounted for.
Now,
So go ahead.
Now, I don't know about anybody's department that is listening to our podcast. The rule book that I was taught by is if a fireman goes down or gets hurt, whether it's a broken pinky, a hangnail, or they pass away, you don't say their name on the main channel or any channel, period.
Yeah.
And that's one faux pas that they did. Now, let's just imagine for a second that you are that firefighter's father, mother, wife, son, daughter, some kind of close relation. I mean, how would you feel hearing your relative's name
On the
being
scanner.
mentioned
On
on
the
the
scanner.
scanner?
Yeah.
And in reference to pushing an emergency call button.
Right.
And that's one faux pas I don't really think I could look over. But then again, with everything that was going on, they probably wasn't thinking, that at that particular time. But now I'll tell everybody what, and what we're talking about is kind of somber and, is a tragedy. But that dispatcher had the hardest time pronouncing the name of that store. And I'm not going to lie to anybody about it. I have to stop for just a second before I say it to make sure I say it right. And Chris, you got those clips. Play it for the folks so they can hear it.
Which one?
I don't care. Either one
Oh,
was
okay.
funny.
I'll play the initial dispatch one again.
Okay.
Because that was where it was. Where? Hold on 1 second, guys. There it is.
Dispatch at engine 11, engine 10, ladder 5, battalion 4, good here for possible structure. Dispatch at engine 11, engine 10, ladder 5, battalion 4, starter route to 1807 Savannah Highway, behind a Superstore, Super Sofa Store, possible 7-6, 1909 out.
So there you go. He got a little tongue-tied there.
Yes, he did. And there was one phone call that he made. I think it was trying to get another ambulance out there, where a little girl on the other end asked where the name of the store, and he tries to say it, and he gets it all bumfuzzled. And he gets flustered, and he says, "Damn it, I can't pronounce the name of that place."
Bro, that dispatcher, he was just a cool cat, I promise you.
Yes, he was. I mean, we joke about that little faux pas of him having trouble pronouncing the name of the place, but all in all, he kept his cool. Even when he had people calling in with stupid stuff. He had one guy called in wanting to know where the fire was at, and
yeah.
And did you get that clip?
No, I didn't.
But
I had a hard time deciding what to take and what not to take last night when I was doing it.
Yeah, but he called in, wanted to know if there was a fire on such and such a road, and the dispatcher said no, it's on Savannah Highway, and he asked where at on some, just questions that he didn't have time to answer at the time. But he handled that cool and collective too. He was not rude. He told the man, he said, "Look, brother, I don't have time to talk to you. You call me back later and we'll talk. Love you, babe. Bye."
Yeah.
And hung up. And I guarantee, just listening to the way he talked and the way he acted, Chris, I told you earlier today, I guarantee you that man is wearing a polyester button-up shirt to this day with gold chains and driving a Stingray Corvette.
Right. So here is a part where they had some issues with accountability. I think he was trying to basically do a power check on this. I'm going to play this clip, and then we'll talk about it. Then I've got another one where he's trying to clear the radio. So let me play this accountability clip real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Is everybody out? Where you at? No, sir. We still got guys in there. People know that if somebody's going for a mayday. Now, my people in the back are out. What about some people in the front? Yeah, cool. They called that out. Everybody stay off the radio. Keep lying. We need to make sure your people are accounted for first. You need to make sure of that.
So, Jay, I know you can't hear it. He said, "Is everybody out?" I know you heard this part of it. He said, "Is everybody out?" And there's like, "No, we got," the other person said, "No, we got people still inside." And then the chief said, "Well, someone called a mayday." And that's when he repeated, "Is everyone out?" And then that is at that point he's trying to get people to clear the radio.
Now, when the chief first got there, the crap hadn't really started hitting the fan yet, and it is, to me, this part is a breakdown of the face-to-face interaction, update, whatever you want to call it, between the initial incident commander and the chief.
Right.
And one of the first things I would want to know is who's inside, how many, what are they doing, you know, the important stuff. The first thing I would want to know is where are my guys at,
Right.
and what are they doing? And
It's a basic lunar report.
exactly. And there was one video I was watching of a different fire, which we'll have in the series coming up, where I believe it was 6 firefighters died, and they were having a news conference, and one of the reporters asked the chief, "Where was your accountability system?" And the chief responded, "We don't have time for that when we arrive at a scene. We have so much going on, we don't have time to take accountability to know where every firefighter is. It's impossible to know." Ladies and gentlemen, pardon my language, but I call bullshit.
Right. That's why you have safety officers.
Exactly. But remember, Charleston Fire Department at this time did not have a safety officer.
Right.
So that's another thing that, was basically kind of reading between the lines. It wasn't a thing like you really need to have a safety officer at fire calls. You know that, right?
Right.
It was more to me like, damn it, you're gonna have a safety officer. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts in the conversation.
Right.
So I mean, if they'd have had an assigned safety officer, maybe things would have been different. But it just goes all back to the lack of the ICS training, and because I don't know if you remember it correctly, or I might be remembering it incorrectly. It's been eons ago. It's the fire chief, deputy chief, safety officer, battalion chiefs, captains, lieutenants,
and
so forth.
Yeah.
And then firefighter, correct?
Right.
And
depending on department structure.
Yeah.
Some don't have deputy chief. Some go straight to assistant chief. It just depends.
Yeah. And, and you curtail the ICS system to fit your emergency.
Right. That's what's great about it. You can expand it or collapse it as the situation grows or lessens.
Exactly. And, and for the Superstore, that call, definitely needed the ICS system.
Right. And it didn't have it.
No. I mean, the incident commander should have been, off-site somewhere, close, but off-site. Have your battalion chiefs command your divisions, A, B, C, D, or Division 1, 2, 3, however your department has it. Relying on it, they rely on information from the captains, lieutenants inside, and just excuse me, and just roll from there. Lack of a PIO, public information officer. There's reports of dead firemen getting out before they even pulled the first body out.
Yeah, well, think of it in a good term that in 2007 social media wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is now. So it's like now if something like that happens, people on Facebook are going to know about it before the chief does.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest here.
Yeah, and the PIO does a whole lot more than just talk to the press.
Right.
And anything from anything that's above captain, I don't know what to say. I mean, my dad was chief for a long time, and he always told me, it started when I made captain. He said, son, you have one foot in the grave, the other foot's on a banana peel. Watch what you do, watch what you say.
Exactly.
And and then he followed it up with, and it gets worse the higher up you go.
Exactly. So, yeah, let's not get like too sidetracked on the ICS because that could be like a whole entire show.
Yeah.
But so the last clip that we played, he was calling for basically for a power check, and he was telling people to clear the radio. Well, this is more or less a continuation of that clip, but I want you guys to pay attention to the very end of this clip and listen because you'll hear one of the firefighters actually praying. So I'm going to go ahead and play that.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's a little part, you just barely catch it, of one of the other firefighters telling him to tell his wife, I love you, if it's the same clip I'm thinking.
That's a different clip, but I'll play that next.
Okay.
So, again, you're going to hear the chief say, everybody clear the radio, and then you can barely make out the firefighter praying over the radio, but it's near the very end. You're going to have to listen close for it. So here we go. I'm going to play it.
Everybody stay on the radio. Jesus' name. Amen.
That's kind of freaky.
Yeah, it gets to you.
And then the other... go ahead.
And if you listen while he's praying, you can hear if you listen real close, you can hear the fire burning. And you can hear him actually gasping for air.
Yeah, and you can hear the pass alarms going off in the background too.
Now.
Okay, so this is another clip, the one you're talking about before. It's a little longer, and I believe the order of it, this one came before the other one that I just played. Because he said, tell my wife I love you, and then he's like, off the radio, then you hear the other guy praying, but I cut him up because I didn't want all this extra like noise in there, so...
Right.
So here we go.
I love you.
Call my wife. Tell her I love you. Okay.
When I'm not going to lie to you about it. I guess I've turned into a softy in my old age, but when I heard that, and then hearing the other firefighter praying, I teared up because it really hit home that, hey, even though this happened in 2007, I'm still listening to nine firefighters die,
and at least two directly.
Yeah, and I teared up. It got to me, and they had wives, they had kids, and
family.
Yeah, and it was what are they going to do now type feeling, and even though I wasn't there, even though it was umpteen years ago,
right,
I had this helpless feeling,
right,
and I really can't explain it. But
so we're going to switch tracks a little bit here, Jay.
Thank you, because I was starting to tear up again.
I want to talk about the more or less the legal side of it, and two of the questions on our list actually cover that. The first one is, how did this company, the Sofa Superstore company, get away with all these undocumented additions? Why were there not building permits for these changes?
I have a theory on that, but I'm not really going to say. You and I have talked about it.
Well, it's kind of a known fact that he was getting. They were planning on getting furniture for the firehouse from them.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say it was the fire department directly.
Yeah.
Maybe city officials or something like that.
Yeah.
And again, this is another one of those what ifs.
Right. This is we don't know, that we're speculating.
Yeah, it's big time speculating. Okay, so don't take it for fact, folks. But they had just built a new fire station, and that's where the fire department would get all their furniture from. Now we all know that anyone that deals with, a city fire department, you have to submit, requests for this, requests for that, and it goes up the chain to who's ever in charge of the finances at City Hall. Now, let's just say, for instance, and again, this is speculation. It is not proven fact that I know of. Who's to say that the owner of the Sofa
Superstore?
Yeah, what you said. Let's just say he went to the city and said, okay, I know I got some code violations in my building. If you look over this, I'll give you anything you need for your new fire stations.
Right.
Again, major speculation. But in the back of my mind, it's still a what if, and we can what if this thing, like I said, until the cows come home.
Exactly. And that covers the really more or less the next question on the list. You covered it. And the next question said, how did the fire department not see these code violations prior to the incident, or were they even doing routine inspections?
Well, it was stated on the videos that I watched and the papers that I read that there was no fire marshal's office to enforce any kind of fire codes.
Okay.
The only time that they would really get an inspection, so to speak, and let's put the word inspection in quotes here, was when they would do a pre-incident survey walkthrough. And the firefighters, unfortunately, were not trained to spot code violations. And, so they probably, unbeknownst to them, they missed it. But the big thing to me would be the sprinkler system.
Right.
Now, by law, and this is kind of turn around back on, one thing here. You'll see what I'm talking about. By law, if you have a building that's been grandfathered in, which I'm going to say that by it being so long before the additions, the main showroom was grandfathered in, so they wouldn't have to have sprinklers.
However,
well, hang on, it's getting good, folks. Here, when the West showroom was built, by law, or at least here in North Carolina, by law, if you put an addition or any kind of upgrade to the existing grandfathered building, you have to bring the whole entire structure up to code, which means if you had sprinklers in the new addition, you have to put them in the old addition. And then, bless God in heaven, the following year, we built a twin showroom on the east side. Same thing. If you build an addition or upgrade the existing structure that's been grandfathered in, you have to bring said existing structure up to code. Okay, now, remember back when we were going through the findings from the IAFF, there was no building permits issued for those upgrades. And there was code violations found after the fact during the investigation. Now, Savannah Highway in Charleston, South Carolina sounds like it's a pretty busy road.
Yeah.
You know that there had to have been somebody from the building department, a higher official from uptown, ride by that place and see those additions going on.
Exactly.
So, if nothing else, go in there with their wife to pick out a new couch for the credenza and see this new construction. Why wasn't it questioned then?
Exactly.
I mean,
somebody had to have been turning a blind eye. That's all there is to it.
I mean, exactly.
Somebody in the city, because.
But if it was me, and let's just say we were, my company was out doing training, and we see new construction going on, I would, honest to God, I would make them stop. Go to whoever's doing the construction, say, hey, mind if we look around and see, so we'd be familiar if something ever happens.
Yeah, we'll walk in and be like, okay, we're trying to update the pre-plan.
Yeah. And, 99% of the time it was no problem. Yeah, sure, come on in, And in Dare County, I don't know about anywhere else in North Carolina or in South Carolina, but Dare County, you had to have your permit attached to the structure where it is readily visible.
That's probably the case. Probably the case everywhere else, too.
Yeah, and, everyone, played by the rules. They had their building permit. They had all their ducks in a row. And, and like I said, 99% of the time we were able to go in there. The 1% time that, like the project manager or whatnot wasn't there, and, they would ask if we would come back, but we were invited, to come back to look. It wasn't like, no, get the hell out of here. You're not welcome here.
Right.
Thing,
And then if you really want to go more into what ifs, why wouldn't they install sprinklers and come up to code? All that does is help their insurance rating. Their insurance rates go down for the business,
yep.
Unless. Speaking of insurance, just saying, I'm going to leave that there.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
You get what I'm putting down.
Yeah, I get what you're putting. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
All right. So I guess like the last thing we need to talk about, I would say, is the traffic control on Savannah Highway. There was. Oh, go ahead.
When we were talking about that last night, my son summed it up best. Traffic control was at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it wasn't it wasn't in existence when the fire first started, and right. It seemed like, and we heard them call for it, but it seemed like it was forever into the incident before they did.
Yeah.
And did your department on any kind of fire, do you get law enforcement response automatically, or do you have to request it?
My old department, depending on the size of the incident, something like that, yeah, we would call law enforcement. But if it's like a car accident or something like that, we would handle traffic ourselves.
Yeah.
But something like that, it wouldn't be automatic, but we would, say, hey, send law enforcement to close down the road.
Yeah.
But I think this clip here is talking about the supply line issue, or the the traffic, because cars were driving over the supply lines. I'm surprised it didn't tear any of them up. But
Yeah.
let me play this real fast.
16 dispatch, tell PD they need to stop traffic going eastbound on, or northbound on 17 from Wahoo. They're running over my supply line.
Yeah. So that's where he called for PD to stop eastbound. No, he said eastbound. No, I mean northbound on wherever it was from, because cars are running over the supply lines.
Yeah. And I mean, it's only a brief second that they run, that the pressure of the car or truck is on the hose, but that brief second is enough to hamper your water supply, cause a water hammer,
Right.
and possibly destroy your pump, bust hose lines.
I know. Not only that, with a fully charged line like that, especially a small one, it wouldn't take much to bust a line with cars running over.
Exactly. Now, I know this don't have anything to do with the Sofa Superstore fire, but in talking about the size of the supply lines, we had a fire at a condominium complex there on the coast where I was living, and we laid 5-inch in from the hydrant, and we were in the mop up stage of the fire, and I was at rehab getting my bottle changed out and everything, and the security guard, I'll never forget it, his name was Ricky Parrott. He comes diddy bopping up in a golf cart, and I guess he thought he was going to run over that 5-inch like you would an 1.5 inches, but he had that golf cart just as wide open as he could get it. He hit that 5-inch hose, and on my mother's grave, he stood that stupid thing up on its nose and dumped his ass out right there in the parking lot.
I can see that.
And if you asked me if I laughed and I said no, I'd be lying. That was the best chuckle I had in a long, long time.
Right.
Especially when he looked over at us and he said, "Well, that didn't work like I thought." And we're all like, "No shit." But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that little bit of humor in there.
Yeah, that's good. So I guess we need to go ahead and wrap this up because we're an hour and 5 minutes into this segment. Do you want to go ahead and do the tribute? Do you have your list handy?
Yeah, let me bring that up right quick.
Just tell me when you're ready and I'll start on my end.
Okay. All right, I got it.
Okay.
Hopefully I can get through it without humans. Let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
In loving memory and the most heartfelt respect to the Charleston 9, Captain William Billy Hutchison, Captain Michael Mike Dinky, Captain Lewis Mulkey, Engineer Mark Kelsey, Engineer Bradford Brad Beatty, Assistant Engineer Michael Frenchy French, Firefighter James Earl Drayton, Firefighter Brandon Thompson, Firefighter Melvin Champagne. Brothers, may you rest in peace, and you will never be forgotten. Over 135 years of combined experience gone from us.
It's time for our pro tip, where we leave you with the knowledge from our experience to help you be safe and come home. And now, here's Jay with this week's tip.
Folks, as you've heard throughout this podcast, there was a lot of things that we discussed, a lot of things that we talked about. It really, really in depth. And I'm only going to hit on a couple of things from it for the pro tip. Accountability. Whenever you do training, use the accountability system. If it's nothing more than just a smokehouse training, live burn, whatever you're doing, use the accountability system. So if you get a big fire like this was, you'll know what to do, how to use it, and you can keep up with everybody. There's no sense in being almost 30 minutes into an incident and still not know where your people are. Secondly, practice do Mayday drills. Make sure you have an SOP for that situation. Someone calls Mayday, you know what to do.
And
practice with.
I'm gonna interject there, and not only practice them, but have a standard in your department as to which system you use. Are you going to use the lunar system? You know, what are you going to use? That way everybody knows what to listen for. Some people use lunar, other people use the other ones. We tend to use the shorter one. Go ahead, Jay.
And like I was getting ready to touch on that. Use, your system, whatever it is, lunar or whatever you have. Practice that too when you're doing your Mayday drill. This was a tragedy that really could have been prevented had the proper training been in place, the proper SOPs been in place, and the proper equipment. And lastly, the last thing I want to touch on is your equipment. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure you're rolling with the modern, whatever the latest and the greatest is. Try to acquire it. Turnout gear, 10 years maximum. I know it's not cheap, but one set of turnout gear versus a human life, it should be a no-brainer. And if you're a smaller department, not a really big budget, there are grants out there that you can get to help you get turnout gear, new apparatus, new equipment, whatever you need. Safer grant. If you can justify it for use of fighting fire or EMS services, 9 times out of 10, you'll get what you ask for. I've seen it in action and I've seen it work.
But Jay, NFPA standards are just a suggestion.
Well, here's my theory on that.
I've heard that. I've heard it. Trust me.
Yeah, I know. I have too. And this is exactly what I tell them. It might be a standard, but practice it like it was law. Because the people who come up with it, they know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. They might be a little bit smarter than we are. But practice all these things. Look into the safer grants. I mean, you have a family at home that loves you, and they want to see you come home. Go home to them. And even if you're just sitting here listening to podcasts, not on duty, if you have children, hug your children. Hug your wife. Because the next time that pager goes off or the alarm sounds, it might be the last time.
Well, Jay, my takeaway from today's episode is this. There were many, many bad calls made on the fire ground that day. There was no accountability in place. For most of the incident, the assistant chief did not know who was there and doing what. Freelancing was rampant. Water supply. Water supply was not nearly adequate enough to combat that volume of fire that they were facing. Poor ventilation tactics. As we mentioned in the last show, ventilation needs to be planned and tactically executed. The window should never have been smashed at all. And looking at the video, the windows were already getting smoke stained and showing signs of flashover. And introducing that oxygen just made it flash faster. The fire was already in the decay phase due to poor ventilation. I could go on and on, but the bottom line is that this was a preventable and senseless loss of 9 souls that day. What about you, Jay?
Agree 100%. This fire was a pyramid of Murphy's Law from the time it was dispatched till the time they carried the last body out. My heart goes out to the families of those firefighters. And, as long as, unfortunately, as long as we go interior firefighting, things like this will happen. Just pray that better training, better tactics, better equipment, and level-headed decision-making hopefully that fire runs rapid, so to speak, no pun intended, throughout the country, and eventually, maybe one day we won't have to go to Emmitsburg to memorialize any more firefighters.
Any other thoughts?
I could go on and on and on and on about this call, but due to time constraints and whatnot, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Hey, Jay.
Yeah.
So a farmer calls his local fire department one day. He says, "Come quick, my barn's on fire, my barn's on fire." The dispatcher says, "Calm down, now just tell us how to get there." The farmer says, "Oh, don't you have that big red truck anymore?"
Boom, boom.
And for our next episode, tune in.
Oh, hang on. I got a rebuttal.
Okay.
There's this big oil well fire down in Texas.
Uh-huh.
And they called in all the big experts on oil rig firefighting to come fight the fire. And nobody could get within 100 feet of it. So as a last resort, they call this little podunk volunteer fire company down the road. And they come up with their little Model T fire truck, and they pull up within 20 feet of the burning oil rig. They jump off the rig, and they spray themselves down with water and proceed to put the fire out on the oil rig. Well, about a week later, the owner of the oil company was so impressed and so happy that they saved his oil rig that he'd give them a check for $500,000. And when he asked the fire chief, he said, "Chief, so what's the first thing you're going to do with all that money?" Chief looked at him and said, "First thing we're going to do is fix the damn brakes on that damn fire truck."
I love it. So tune in to the next show, where we will delve into the case study of the West Warwick, Rhode Island Station nightclub fire that claimed the lives of 100 people with 230 injuries. We wanted to make sure to remind you of our upcoming monthly live show, Host Jockeys After Hours. This is an unstructured live show that we discuss whatever comes to mind. Our listeners are invited to participate via our Discord channel. Please see the show page on Stitcher for the link. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. We're listed on all the major services, and we will see you next time.
And one thing I would like to say before we close out, I know we don't say it enough, but we want to thank everyone who listens to us.
Exactly.
And without you, we would just be sitting here talking to ourselves.
Exactly. And hope you all have a great week.
Yep. We're 10-7, folks. 2 in.
2 out. You've been listening to Hose Jockeys Unite. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and please tell your friends about us. And always, always remember, even truckies need love too.